Hi everybody, welcome to All Games New and Old. I'm David Rodriguez and today I'm going to be reviewing Horrified, American Monsters. This came out in 2021. It is a co-op game for 1 to 5 players. It takes about 45 minutes to an hour to play. It was put out by Ravensburger and is designed by Mike Mulvihill. Now, this is a follow-up to the original Horrified, which featured some of the Universal monsters like Dracula, the Mummy, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, those sorts of things. But this one went a little different route. This one is filled with American cryptids like Bigfoot and whatnot. But before I go too much into describing the whole theme of it, I'm going to send it to our expert in all things horrific, Count Bakula. Go ahead, Count.
Ah, David! So good to be back on your show. It's about time you do another game with a vampire in it, and even better yet, this one is my cousin Dracula.
Oh, I'm sorry, Count. You're thinking of the original Horrified. That one had Count Dracula in it, but this one is the American monster, so it has Chupacabra, Ozark Howler, that sort of thing.
But why would anyone play this game? These monsters aren't scary. I suck blood. It is terrifying. What does a Chupacabra suck?
Goats.
Alright, I'm going to head out. Peace!
Okay, yeah, that one does sound kind of weird when I put it that way. But anyway, so this game, all these cryptids have descended upon this one poor town, and you and a group of other investigators will be trying to save the town from whatever it is that those cryptids are trying to do. So you'll pick your different investigators, you'll pick the cryptids you want to go against. You could play against 2 if you want an easy game, all the way up to 4 if you want a really difficult game. And hopefully you can save the town before everyone becomes too horrified to even stay in the town anymore. Anyway, with that being said, let me take you to our gameplay video so you can see how this game works. Alright, so I have the game set up to play a 2-player game. I'm not going to go too deep into the setup, but I've drawn all the necessary item tiles here, so that way they're all set. You just kind of pull out 12 at the beginning of the game and put them wherever it says to put them. So for instance, I'm going to grab this one again. This one, so we can zoom in on that a little bit better. So that says it goes to the town center, so you just put it on that spot on the board. Some spaces could end up with more than one token on them. That's fine. So I've got that set up. I have the terror track over here. That is on space number 0. Now that is one of the lost conditions. If the terror track gets all the way to the end, then the town is too horrified to continue, and so you lose the game. And the main way the terror track will go up is if a investigator or a citizen is defeated by a monster. That'll always make the track go up. Certain monsters may have other ways that'll make them go up as well. I have the investigators that I've picked on the board. So I have the cryptozoologist down here. She is at the resort. And I have the journalist here at the tavern. They all have their specific starting locations. And I have the monsters in their locations too. I'm not sure you can see it in this view, but the Banshee of the Badlands, which is one of the monsters I picked here, is at the cemetery, whereas the Chupacabra is over at the farm. So they're all set there. Over on the side here, I have my monster deck, I have my perk deck, I have my 3 dice, and then I have my monster cards. So I have the Banshee of the Badlands here. I'm going to scroll this up a little bit, and I have the Chupacabra here. Each one of them is going to be defeated in a different way, so I'm not going to go too in depth about how you defeat each monster, but I will show you a couple things. Each one has a frenzy order here, so at the beginning of the game, you're going to put the frenzy token, which is this one, on the monster with the lowest numbered frenzy order. And what that basically means is that they have a better chance of coming out to do, or to activate and move an attack, because some of the cards will specifically say that the frenzy monster gets to go, and that might mean that the frenzy monster gets to go twice if their symbol is also on that card that you drew. So that's all set there. Like I said, I'm not going to go too into each monster because they're also very different. I'm just going to give you an overview of how the game works. So they're set there. Over on this end over here, I have the investigators I picked, the cryptozoologist, and the journalist. They each start with a perk card randomly picked. And then I have the citizen standees over there, which can come out as the game progresses. Now each card each character card, I should say, will tell you how many actions they get. So in this case, she gets 4 actions. It'll also have their starting locations. For her, it's the resort. And it'll tell you what their special action is. So she can place your investigator in any location with a monster. Whereas the journalist here, he has 5 actions, but he doesn't really have a special ability here at all. So his special ability is just that he gets an extra action. There's also a character that only has 3 actions, but he can kind of teleport around pretty much. Most of the investigators seem to have 4 though. When you're ready to get started, you're going to have a starting player go, and you have your choice of different actions you can do, again, based on the number of actions that your character is allowed to do. So, for instance, you could choose to move. In that case, if I was moving the investigator, he has 5 actions, so each space he moves counts as 1 action. So if I wanted to move there, he would have spent 1 of his actions. Theoretically, I could do all his moves and move like 2, 3, 4, 5 if I wanted to. Use all those actions up, but certainly don't have to do that. You can use as many moves as you like, as long as you only use the number of actions you have. Another thing that you can do is you can guide a citizen to or from an adjacent location. So as you go, and I'll show you this in a minute a little better, but citizens, like these guys, will come out on the board. They don't really move on their own. So with the guide action, I can move the citizen from an adjacent location. So I can move the citizen there, or I can move that citizen to an adjacent location. So I can move this one over here if it was in my spot. So that's something that you can do as an action. You can also pick up any number of items in your location. So there are all these items across the board, and if you are in a space that has them, for instance, this one has 2, I could use 1 pickup action and pick up both those items. Now, these items are usually going to be helpful in some way in dealing with the monsters that you're fighting. So it varies depending on the monster. But another thing that's good about these is if you were to take damage from a monster, you can discard one of these to basically soak up that damage. So pretty useful to have, even if you don't necessarily need a specific one to deal with the monster that you're fighting. Another action you could do is you could share items between investigators in your location. So if the cryptozoologist was in the same location as me, I could give her some of my items or vice versa. Pretty simple, but that could be really useful if they can get to a spot where they can fight a monster a little better than I can. Another action I could do is I could advance a challenge by using an item at the specified location. For example, let's look at the chupacabra here. One of the things you could do with that activate ability is if you're at the farm, you can place a goat, which is one of the items, weirdly enough, on one of the empty spaces and continue until all 6 spaces are filled. So you can see here, there's spaces where you would place your goats, and that would count as an advance action. For instance, all the monsters have their own different things, but that's how it works for chupacabra. You could then also defeat a monster. I'll just pull chupacabra back here. So once I've gotten all the goats in there, if I'm at chupacabra's location, I can use yellow items that their point total on the bottom, because each one has a strength level basically, equals to 6 or more to defeat it. So as long as I have those, I can discard them and use an action to defeat the chupacabra. The final action that you can pick is to do a special action, which is, again, this is their special ability here that's on the bottom of their card. The journalist doesn't have one, but most of them do. Now you do start with those perk cards, and those you can use pretty much at any time, including during your opponent's turn. So that's pretty important to know. You can basically have those as a free action, but once you use them, you have to discard them. Once your investigator has gone, you're going to then do the monster phase. So you're going to pick one of these monster cards. You're going to flip it over and kind of see what it says. And you're going to basically activate this from the top to the bottom. So at the top here, it has an item icon with a number in it. In this case, it says 3. So what you're going to do is you're going to grab the bag, which is right here. This one here. You're going to go and open that. And in this case, you'll pull out 3 items at random. I think I got 3. We'll see. I got some number for sure. Okay. So I've got the shovel, which goes to the cemetery. No problem. I have the camera that goes to the resort. And I have the wolf that's going to the cemetery. So cemetery is a busy place. So I've done that. Now we're going to move further down the card. This is a citizen card. So it's going to say, the recluse, place Mr. Cash at the mansion. So you're going to find the standee of Mr. Cash here. Okay, so here's Mr. Cash's standee, and I'm going to go ahead and place him at the mansion. So I'm going to take note of his standee here, and it says at the bottom that he wants to go to the hospital. Now that's important because that's basically how you're going to protect these people, is by taking them with you to the hospital. So I'm going to go ahead and put him at the mansion. One thing I forgot to mention, when you're moving, if there are citizens in the same space as you, you can basically take them along with you, and that doesn't cost any extra action. So that's important to know, because that's how you'll get those guys to their safe spaces usually. Okay, so once you've done that middle part of the card, now you're going to get to the bottom part. So on the bottom here, there's going to be a number of icons. It can vary depending on the card. This one is for the Mothman. So if the Mothman was in play, we would go ahead and move him one space, and that's going to be usually towards an investigator, or if there's no investigator, towards the nearest citizen. And then if they're in a space with a citizen or an investigator, they're going to roll 2 dice to attack. The other icon here is the Frenzy one. Now see, we don't have this one, which is the Mothman app, but we do have the Frenzy, because someone's always frenzied. So in this case, the Banshee of the Badlands would move one space and roll 2 dice. So if I do that down here, she would go to that space. Now there's no one else in her space with her, so she is not going to roll 2 dice. If she did, let's say she actually had 2 move, she'd be right there. You would take your dice. In this case, it's saying 2 dice. So I would roll those. And, oh, this is a good roll to show you what goes on. So some of the sides are blank, and those, of course, don't do anything. But if it gets that particular symbol, that is going to do damage to somebody. And it's going to target investigators first. And if there's no investigators, it'll go for citizens. But that's how you can get hurt. If you don't have an item to protect yourself, to soak up that damage, you will get defeated. And basically, that will move the terror track up 1 and send you to the hospital. So not good. You don't want that to happen. On the other hand, this particular one, that's always going to be specific to the monster that you have. So with the Banshee, I'm going to try to pull this over here and not mess up everything. Okay, so, oops. So it says, move all violent, oops, okay, well, that didn't work out. Okay, it says move all violins 1 space towards the skeleton per power icon rolled. So, I just slid all these things right off of there. So you have 1 violin per player in this case, and you would move them 1 space over. If they get to the skeleton, that's bad news. So you don't want that to happen. So anyway, but that's what you would do for her in that case. Every monster has their own effect when you roll that particular icon. So once you've done all those things, you can go and discard that and go on to the next player's turn. I'm going to show you another monster card, just so you can see another way this could go here. So this one does not put any items out, but this has something specific for the Chupacabra, which is one of the monsters that we're using. So it's the Hunger. Move Chupacabra to the closest player holding a item of that color. So he would just jump across the board, if need be, to that player, and it would suddenly be there. And then at the bottom, the icons are the Ozark Howler, the Mothman, and the Jersey Devil. So since none of those are in play, in this case, none of those things would happen. But that's something that could happen. If any of those were in play, they would move 3, and they would roll 1 die to attack. So it's a lot of movement, not a lot of attack, but that's how that goes. So as I mentioned, the way you're going to win this game is you are going to basically defeat all the monsters you have in play. If you want a pretty easy game, you can play 2 monsters, and they talk about going all the way up to 4, which of course is going to be a lot tougher. The way you would lose is if that terror track gets all the way to the end. Again, that would mean everybody's too horrified to continue. Or if you run out of monster cards and you have to draw one, then you've taken too long to save the town, and that's your other loss condition. So hope all that makes sense and makes it pretty clear without getting into the nitty-gritty details of how each monster works. That's the basics of the game. It explains really well in the rulebook how each monster is put out and what you have to do to deal with them. So I didn't want to go into all of that. I just want to give you a basic overview of how it plays and hopefully show you that it's actually a pretty easy game to get a handle on. But again, depending on how many monsters you have out there, it could be pretty difficult to actually win. So with all that being said, let me move on to our final thoughts.
All right, I hope that gameplay overview is helpful to you. Now we're going to talk about our final thoughts, starting with the artwork. I really like the art in this one. I think it's really, really eye-catching. The first one, the cover used very, just like red, yellow, blue colors, and then the colors inside the game were much more muted and probably much more spooky because of it. This one has a lot more bright colors. Everything is really, really vivid. I think the art on the cards is really great. Looks awesome. I get a good sense of who these characters are just by the expressions and whatnot that they've put on them. So yeah, I really have no complaints about the art. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. I think as far as I'm not sure if they use the same artist or not, but the art style is pretty much the same as in this version as the original. The color scheme is a lot different. The original one, it's more, more muted colors, more kind of black and white Universal movie monster colors. This one kind of reminds me of like 1980 horror films, so nice bright colors. Even the characters kind of remind me of 80 horror film characters. And so kind of going back to the tokens though, like I think it actually makes it a little bit harder to see the tokens on the board when you're kind of just looking around trying to find, because like the brown and like the teal green color are actually are kind of similar in color. So when you're just trying to quickly look at the board to see where you need to go to get a certain color, it takes longer to figure out where you need to go, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. They did kind of go with they went with oddly muted colors for the item tokens, and it makes them it does make them a little harder to spot. It's sort of strange, but I don't know why they went with that particular choice.
But I do enjoy the artwork, and I think they did a good job of all the characters on all the cryptids.
Yeah, I do agree though. It feels like an 80s horror movie. I get strong Friday the 13th vibes. Like I feel like they should do a little expansion, stick Jason in there, and could be like, oh, I'm in a different place, but I'll still kill people. I talk like this. He doesn't talk.
There's a high school there.
There's a high school. That's fun. There's camp. There's got to be counselors. He loves killing camp counselors. It's his favorite thing. We all have to have hobbies. So, yeah. I dig it though. Very good. So.
Yep. So for the components, I think the components are good with this game. They're very similar to the original. The board is nice. The standees are nice, heavy cardstock. The models are decent. They have a little bit more detail, I think, in this version. The cards are a little bit on the thinner side, but it's not a deck building game, so you don't have to. You really only have to shuffle them at the beginning of the game. So I think for what you use the cards for, I think the cards are a decent card stock.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the cards aren't anything to write home about, but they're fine. There's nothing wrong with them either. They're good. All the cardboard is nice and thick. The board seems very sturdy. I think the models they're definitely more detailed in this one than they were in the original Horrified, and I don't know if it's the nature of what these creatures are compared to the first ones, that they just are going to have more detail or what, or if they actually went with a different sculpt or a different technique to make the models. I'm not certain, but either way, they do look a lot cooler, I think. One of the areas that I do have to kind of knock this one versus the other one, and this is minor, by the way. I don't want it's not like a big deal. This one, the bag that you pull your items out of is like the same material that you see in like a reusable shopping bag, whereas the original was a cloth bag. And I just like the cloth one a lot better. I know this can potentially fall apart. I don't know. I feel like this one's harder to pack in the box, and I don't know.
This one also has a Velcro closure, so like it can kind of scratch you while you're pulling tokens out. So I'll probably make a bag for this game for us to replace.
Yeah, it's far from a deal breaker. It's really a nitpick, but yeah, I mean, if we're gonna compare, and I think you almost have to, I prefer the cloth bag over this situation.
And with the tokens themselves, I prefer the original game. For some reason, the shape of these tokens just make it harder to tell how many you're grabbing out of the bag. So I found I was constantly grabbing like an extra token when I was pulling them out of the bag. So.
Yeah, I agree. I have no idea why that is.
Yeah.
I couldn't begin to tell you, but something about it. Yeah, it's like I always think I'm like if I have to have 2, I can never. I'm always like, wait, do I actually have 3 right now, or do I? I don't know. It's not a huge thing, but it's there. So moving on to the theme of the game, I really feel like they did a good job integrating the theme into this game. It's really neat how much like the first game, the different monsters all behave differently. They'll have different abilities and ways you have to defeat them. But, and I'm not super knowledgeable about all these creatures, but the ones I do know, I feel like they've captured pretty well. I especially like that Bigfoot is not super aggro at all. Like, he's trying to avoid you. That's what he's trying to do. He doesn't really want to mess with you. He just wants to get away. And I really like that the whole thing is you're just trying to, like, complete a picture of him to prove that he's real. Like, that's all you're doing. You're not trying to kill Bigfoot. You're just trying to show everybody that he's real. Little things like that. I think it's really, really well done in this game.
Yeah, I agree. I think they did a good job of incorporating the lore of all these cryptids into this game and making what the creature does make sense to the lore behind that cryptid. So I think they did a really good job of incorporating all that.
Definitely.
So, onto the gameplay. If you've played the original Horrified, it plays pretty much the exact same, other than just, each monster plays differently. The characters that you play as pretty much are just reskin. They pretty much all have the same powers as the original Horrified characters did. I do find that this game is just slightly more difficult than the original Horrified, simply because it has more spaces. I think it's like 4 or 5 more spaces, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when you only have 4 actions that you can take, having that extra amount of space that you have to travel through to get to where you need to go does make the game just a little bit harder.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's like a smidge. Like, it's not a big jump, but because getting around in a game like this is always very important, having a few more spaces, it does adjust things up just a little bit. So, but I mean, I think that's fine. I still feel like when you play at the easy level, it's still reasonably easy.
Yeah, it's doable, and it's one of those things where like some people might not even really notice it. I just noticed where the terror track marker was on our gameplays of this version versus what we normally have on the original Horrified. We definitely got farther up on those terror tracks when we were playing this version. So.
Yeah, I think that's true. If you played the first game, you know that one of the things you're doing is you're going around and you pick up all the items, and when you look on them, there's wooden stakes and
pitchforks,
all kinds of stuff like that. Okay, this is actually kind of more of a theme thing than a gameplay, but what the heck? I mean, you do it during gameplay, so I feel like I can go it. So this one, much the same, except for one of the colors of items. And those are all animals. So, I'm thinking about what I'm doing. I'm a Girl Scout, right? Okay? So, as you can tell. So, I go to the diner, and I grab a bear. And that bear's going to go with me to the next stop, where I going to get a goat and a teacher from the high school. And I'm going to take him with my goat and my bear, and we're going to go to the next spot over. I don't know, is one of us riding the bear and the other the goat? I'm not sure. Why am I pulling the zoo with me?
Maybe it's a town full of hunters and it's just like you shot the bear and are carrying around the carcass.
We don't look, if you had like a pickup truck, I could is there a girl, this Girl Scout is pulling a bear and God knows how many other
Maybe
animals.
just the head. I don't know. Claw.
Oh my gosh. This is horrible. Anyway, okay, this sounds like a complaint, and I'm not. Honestly, in the first game, even though all those items are very thematic, I rarely pay attention to what they are. But this one, I can't help being like, being like, oh, look, there's a wolf and a goat at the cemetery. I wonder how long that goat's going to be there. Well, the goat's going to stay there until you pick up the wolf and the goat and take it with you to fight Mothman. Because it's like
You're using the goat to train the bear to attack Mothman.
Of course. Next person. Anyway, this is... It doesn't matter. It's fine. It's, again, this is probably more theme than gameplay, but it's just one of those things that I can't escape when I'm playing this game. It keeps popping in my head how weird this is. And I'm pretty sure there's only a color of the animals because they have to have the goat in there for the chupacabra. I thought maybe one of the other monsters would have something important with the other animals. They don't. No. It's just chupacabra. It needs goats. So congratulations, you get bears and wolves and deer. And whatever else I'm missing. I don't know. Yep. Anyway, gameplay is real good though. So there's my gameplay thoughts. It's great. It's just like the first. The monsters are different, which is really the biggest, most noticeable difference in this game. Yeah. So, okay. That was a lot to go through. All right. So getting to our final score. I feel like when you're reviewing a Horrified American Monsters, you're also reviewing the original Horrified because they're basically the same game. If you know how to play one, you know how to play the other than looking at what the monsters do and figuring out how you need to set that up. But, it's you could figure it out if you played one or the other. So, in a way, this is my score for both games. I'm going to give both games an 8. I really, really enjoy this series now. I feel like it belongs right up there with Pandemic in terms of a good co-op game that is also really a great entry-level one to help bring people into the hobby and try out stuff. But, it's not so ridiculously complicated that it's going to scare people away. I think the themes are pretty easy to relate to. This one may be a little harder than the original Horrified. I think everyone is familiar with the Universal Monsters. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many people know the Ozark Howler. I know some of these cryptids. A few of them I probably have heard of at some point, but I don't really know that much about them. So it's a little more foreign to me. That being said, if I was going to give decimal point reviews, which I'm not really, if I was going to do it, I'd probably give this one maybe like an 8.2 and the original an 8. Just because, even though I like those monsters better than the original Horrified, I just love the look of this one because it is so vivid and bright, and I don't know, something about what it evokes, and maybe it's because I watched 80s horror movies a lot when I was a kid. I probably shouldn't have been watching them. But I just really, really dig the look of it. And so because of that little thing where I just like to see it, put out more than I like to see the original one, I might give it a slight notch higher, but not enough to actually boost it to a whole other point. So if someone had me play both of them and I hadn't played either, and they said, now you will buy one, which one will you buy? I would probably actually pick American Monsters just because they're so similar, but I like the way this one looks better. Other than that, more or less the same game. But 8, that's my score.
I agree. For scoring, they play so similar. It's basically the same game. It's really just a matter of which theme you prefer, I think. So, if you have the original Horrified and really like that game, I would still pick up this one because it's, the monsters in this game do play differently than the original Horrified, so just gives you a little bit more variety to pick. But if you don't have either of them, I don't think you need to buy both of them right now. Just pick up which if you think you would be more attracted to the Cryptids or the Universal Monsters. That being said, my score for both of them is actually going to be a 10.
Whoa.
This is my first 10.
That's
so,
high.
I really like these games a lot, and I think they're a lot of fun. And one of the main reasons why I'm giving it a 10 is because I really like and appreciate that you can really... There's so many things that you can do to adjust the difficulty level in these games. And so if you're, a gamer that has played a lot of games, you can do a lot of things to up the difficulty level and make it a really challenging game. if you're playing with new people and you're trying to kind of get them into board games and they're not really familiar with it, it's a really easy way to kind of ease them into co-op games and more board games besides the, Monopoly and stuff like that. And so you can really scale it and make it kind of as easy or as difficult as you want. And so for that, that on top of, I just think it's a really good game, makes it a 10 for me.
Yeah, it is super, super scalable. I mean, beyond just picking the number of monsters, like, you can either choose your people, in which case you could pick ones that have good abilities to deal with the monsters, or you can pick it randomly, which is, another way you can give yourself kind of a slight easier or harder mode even within a given number of monsters, which is really cool.
Yeah.
I like having that kind of variety, because sometimes you want to go in a challenge and you're like, okay, this is going to kick our teeth in probably, but if we win, how amazing will that be?
Yeah.
And sometimes you're like, I've had a rough day and I need a win, so let's get a god dang win. So.
And it's a fairly quick game too.
Yeah,
so for people that aren't used to big, long 3-4 hour games, this is, we play it in about 40-60 minutes. So, and depending on the monsters and characters you play, you might be able to play it even a little quicker than that. So, it's not something that's going to be a long drudge to get newer players to play.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, one of my favorite games ever is Arkham Horror, and from a distance, if you squint, this is very simple, very simple Arkham Horror. If I'm going to bring someone new into gaming, unless I know they're just super, super into the idea, I'm not going to pull out Arkham Horror to play with them, because after 2 hours, they'll be like, what do you mean we're not done yet? At all, or close. Yeah, no. This is a great game to get either new gamers in or people who just don't want to sit through a big, giant marathon, or if you just don't have time, and you just want to get that little co-op feeling, dealing with creepy things, and, whatever. It's a great choice for
There are no silent nights, though.
Yeah, we were talking about how, like, a lot of those games, there'll be, the event cards that usually are bad. There'll usually be this couple in there where it's like, nothing happened, all is quiet. Not in this one. Even when just a citizen comes out, they're like, okay, well, what's his face showed up at the police station, and also Chupacabra, whatever.
Yeah. You at least
Something's
have
happening.
Sometimes you have 3 monsters that do things, which you might not have any of those monsters, so there's a chance that nothing's going to happen.
It could happen.
But then there's some cards where it's like the frenzy monster is going to do something, so you at least have one monster doing something.
Yeah, for sure. So, very few peaceful nights unless it's just kind of a random accident. So.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much it. So I gave it an 8. She gave it a 10. So really high scores. I think this is a game, whichever one you pick, does belong in most people's collections, especially if you want to introduce people to gaming. You can't really go wrong with either of these. So, I hope this video has been useful to you. If it has, please click like and subscribe, and click the little bell icon so you can know about the next time I put out a video. Other than that, I look forward to seeing you all around the table again at All Games New and Old.
Bye.
And this time, nope, terrible take. Ha ha ha. Alright, we change, we try again. Ho ho ho. I'm doing Russian. It's very Russian. Alright.
I think that this game, I lost track of what I was trying to say. I lost it early, and I was trying to come up with something by selling, and it didn't work. It didn't work. I tried. I lost it entirely. I feel like when we're reviewing Horrified American Monsters, we're also kind of reviewing Horrified, because they are a loud printer, is what they are. What is it doing? I don't know. We're sitting over here.
I didn't tell you to print.
Anyway, yeah, I really felt like they could have just slid, Jason Voorhees into this. It feels like he'd be like, oh, it must be a different part of the campground. I'm killing people. Anyway, but I like to think he talks like that. Oh, I better go over there and kill that teenager. I wonder what that one's... Anyway, okay, I'm done. I'm getting sidetracked. Okay, it's weird.
It doesn't say the animals are alive.
I don't know if that makes anything better. What are you talking about?
I mean, if you're hunting and you're
But
collecting
why are they
animals.
leaving them at the town square? I don't know what's going on. Anyway.
Well, you might be the hunter and got them at the town square.
I don't
Then
think,
you're taking the meat home to.
I don't think some of those characters are very huntery. I don't think the journalist is there with this notepad and also with this hunting rifle.
Are you from a small town?
Listen. Okay, wow. If they're hunting, why do we have to go to other places and pick up the guns there? Why don't I just have guns? God dang it. This has got haywire. Listen, it's weird. Why are we collecting animals or animals' corpses? Who left the corpses there? You have a very different movie playing in your head than I do. And yours is gory and weird.
I'm just trying to fill in a scenario that might explain.
Yep. So, anyway. I'm gonna edit all this.
Edit.